uncrewed aircraft systems now, and uncrewed aircraft systems, and kind of an overview, ins and outs of what they are, and some of the challenges that come with UAS and counter UAS. One note, I also might say drone or UAV. They all mean the same thing. They all mean a unmanned aircraft system. So the UAS program for INS, really our goal is to work within the international nuclear security community, to try and understand what the threat looks like in a specific region and how you might mitigate that threat UAS. Basically for nuclear facilities, but a lot of times we'll focus on nuclear power plants. And then we're also starting to look at materials in transit as well. So how we do that is we work with multiple national laboratories here in the US that have various different UAS and counter UAS experience, as well as resources. So our facility is kind of in a high desert area, not a lot of trees, whereas some of the other national laboratories are in very densely treed areas. And so understanding those different resources in terms of environment are important to us. We also have been conducting studies on things like handheld jammers, tethered UAS systems, to understand how those might be used by a protective force or response force, and really just understanding the ins and outs of how those work and how well they work, and if they would be useful, or we think they would be useful in an operational environment. And then also we've recently started to look at how you might use a UAS at a nuclear facility to benefit the nuclear facility in some ways. So whether that's response for intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, or using it to do like perimeter scans or checking on alarms, things like that. And then of course we do a lot of technical engagements, and try to build our relationship with international partners, to knowledge share and to kind of try to build up the capability of us and our partners. So an unmanned aircraft system, really what is it? It consists of electronics of some sort that control motors, tell it where it's at. There's some level of communication, so a way for the pilot to talk and receive information from the UAS itself. And then there's the vehicle or the platform that all of the electronics and communications are mounted onto, and then a payload of some sort, which is generally a camera, but can be a variety of different things, like explosives and various other things. There's no limit to what a UAV can do now. And then there's generally remote controllers, but those are optional. There's fully autonomous flight. There's a lot of different ways that you can get by without actually using a controller, by either programming the drone to fly to certain areas using GPS, or just fully autonomous, where you tell it where it's at on the map and it uses its sensors and cameras to navigate through its environment. But in general, they're controlled by radio frequency. So common remote control frequencies like 433 and 915, or that's supposed to be 915 megahertz. And then common GPS frequencies like 1.3 gigahertz, and then your Wi-Fi frequencies, the 2.4 and 5.8 gigahertz is the most commonly used for commercial off-the-shelf UAV communications. A lot of the hobbyists and individuals that like to dive a little deeper into their UAVs, they might use the 433 and 915 megahertz more. And then there's also satellite communications, and cellular communications are becoming more and more popular now. There's also optical. There's a few drones out there that you can control it using your hand. And then of course there's autonomous, where there's no pilot in the loop. It has its mission pre-programmed, and it just goes and does it, either through that mission or just simply it's smart enough to know where it's at and know where to go based on its environment. So the next few slides are just going to go over some of the common types. So there's multi-rotor aircraft. In general, these are what you'll see with a lot of the commercial off-the-shelf aircraft. In the news, you'll see a lot of multi-rotor aircraft because they're fairly quiet. They're small or large, but generally the COTS ones that are less expensive are going to be small. But they're really, really easy to fly. You can teach anybody how to fly one of these in probably less than a minute or two, straight out of the box. They hover in place. If you let go of the control sticks, it'll just sit there and hover and not really go anywhere. They have pretty high lift capacity. And then really that ability to hover, it's you can pan the camera down and look almost exactly straight down and see where you're going to land or see where you might be dropping something. So these are very popular, especially in the hobbyist people trying to take pictures of themselves or videos of themselves. The next ones are fixed wing and vertical takeoff and landing. So these generally have some sort of airplane wing platform. So that really increases the flight time because it's utilizing the lift that the wings are providing to basically just be a more efficient flight. In general, they're higher speeds, one to generate that lift from the wings, but two, they're more like an airplane, so they generally go faster than the multi-rotor aircraft. A lot of time these are large. The vertical takeoff and landing, which is a characteristic of a multi-rotor as well. But the reason why they're called vertical takeoff and landing is basically it has rotors on the top like a multi-rotor. It lifts up off the runway or wherever you're launching from. And then there's also a rotor in the back that the airplane will eventually transition to. And then you'll use the lift from the wings instead of using the rotors that are creating that lift. So kind of has pros and cons of, or I guess it really has the benefits of both fixed wing and the multi-rotor aircraft. But in general, the fixed wing are a lot more difficult to operate. Takeoff and landings are more difficult. A lot of times, if you just let go of the sticks on a fixed wing aircraft, it's just going to keep going in the direction that it was headed. So if it was headed straight towards the ground, it's just going to go straight towards the ground and crash. A lot of them won't right themselves. So one of the unique payloads that you can have generally on a multi-rotor aircraft or sometimes on a fixed wing is thermal and infrared cameras. And we've been doing some research in this because we think this could be really useful for a response force or a protective force at a nuclear facility. Really, there's a ton of different use cases that they could be used for at a facility, like search and rescue. They could be used to do perimeter sweeps, checking for, especially at night, checking for humans or animals that might have caused an alarm. And again, they're just ideal for night operations. The technology's come a long way, and even some very inexpensive UAS are being equipped with these very high-end thermal cameras, and it's truly amazing what they can do for not a lot of money. The cost of these has gone down considerably, and we're starting to see them more and more on some of the common COTS drones. Of course, there's also some hazardous payloads and weapons. The one on the right there is a large multi-rotor aircraft with a flamethrower on it. In this case, it's trying to do good by knocking something off of this power line, but you could see that you could put various different things in that flamethrower and cause some pretty serious damage. Again, the one on the left here is not necessarily used for malicious intent. It's really used to start prescribed burns. So it has that chute with the ignition spheres, and it drops those, and those start little prescribed burns in areas where they want to have one of those burns. But for here, you could see how that might be used for something not so great, to drop items from this drone. And there's a ton of just very inexpensive, commercial off the shelf, shows up at your front door in 2 or 3 days, dropping mechanisms. And a lot of them are used for like fishing and various other things, but it's very easy on a lot of these drones to just rig up some sort of a dropping device that can carry quite a large item to be dropped. And so just a few more use cases. In terms of the UAS market in the United States, it's the fastest growing sector in the aviation industry in the United States. So 25% expected growth in 2022. I believe it was higher than that. So we're starting to see more and more hobbyists picking up these drones, more and more people using them for things like movie productions or farming, even inspections. One of my neighbors up the street has some solar panels, and the public utility company came out, and instead of climbing on the roof, they just used a drone to look at it. So more and more of these are being used, and as more become available, a lot of the people that we don't want to have these drones will likely be getting their hands on them. So just being aware that there's a lot of uses that are really good, and I'm looking forward to, but there's also a lot of illicit uses that could be really, really bad. So there's this slide is basically just an example of some of the UAS capabilities that are unique, that are somewhat new. The top left is an image of a multi-rotor UAS, a very large multi-rotor, but this thing's able to pull this snowboarder up the ski slope, over buildings. And really, this is just an example of how a UAS might be used in a larger facility to very quickly bring people over a fence line, right? Traditionally, there's really just been a 2D problem where you're trying to find a vehicle or a human crossing a fence line or a PIDUS of some sort with some sensors, but now the UAS could just easily bypass all of that and get people onto your facility very quickly. The one on the top right is an example of a swarm or a coordinated flight. It's a Chinese light show for, I think it was for an automobile company, but they are able to tell each drone exactly where it needs to be and exactly where the other ones are going to be so they don't crash into each other, and exactly what light they need to be shining at that specific time to create these very elaborate images. So it's just an example of one controlling many, essentially. So previously, it was thought that every drone had to have a pilot, and that's not the case anymore. And we always say the most important thing is finding the pilot, because finding the drone a lot of times doesn't tell you anything. You need to be able to find the pilot to actually understand what their motive was. Was it just someone being clueless and careless, or was it someone with some intent? And if there's multiple drones, you might be looking for multiple pilots, but it might just be one person operating multiple. The bottom left is an example of a commercial off-the-shelf drone that has very, very, very advanced obstacle avoidance and human tracking. It has 6 cameras, total, 3 on the top, 3 on the bottom, and 1 in the front. Essentially create a 3D map of its surroundings. And it can do really, really well. You can pick a person out of 5 to 10 people, and it'll, based on your characteristics, it'll follow you around, and it can go very fast. Like, people use it for extreme sports like mountain biking and dirt biking and things like that. And that's really what it was meant for. But you can see how something like that, if you flew it in and said, I want you to follow this responder or this protective force individual, it flies close enough to where it would be a concern to that individual, and they would likely lose situational awareness because that drone would basically just be following them around wherever they went. And then the bottom right is an example of technology that is used in UASs, so for the stability and all the hovering in places, but used for man tech. So this is a hoverboard that can go, I believe, like 100 kilometers an hour and can fly for 20 or 30 minutes. and it utilizes a lot of the same technologies in the auto leveling to make it easier for a human to ride on. And again, just another example of how something like this might be used to get an individual over a fence line much quicker and undetected than originally could be done. And so these are just a couple of pictures of those capabilities. Here's it lifting this individual over a shed, and then again over this very large building. So, and again, with a payload this large carrying a human, that drone's not going to have a considerable flight time. It's probably going to be in the 10 to 15 minutes. With no payload, multi-rotor aircraft generally can fly for 30 to 40 minutes. But with 10 minutes, you could get a lot of people up over that building if you had to. Again, here's an example of the Chinese light show. You can see some of the drones have already taken off. Other ones are still sitting on the ground, and that's essentially what they are. They're just small little multi-rotor aircraft with lights on, but again, with a different payload and this many UAS, you might be able to cause some considerable damage with these drones. Here's just another picture of one of the images, and another one of the images these drones were able to create. This is an example of that Skydio. So this individual has it following him on his bicycle. If you have some time, there's some videos online of this Skydio unit, and it's pretty capable and surprising how well it's able to map its environment. I think it will map anything over the size of a pencil. So it can even, when it gets into places where it knows it can't get through, if you have a GPS beacon that's talking to this drone, which Skydio also sells, it'll actually back itself out of the spot that it got stuck in until it's able to fly up, and then it'll go back and re-find you. So even if you were traveling through a very dense area, you could imagine someone just tossing the beacon under a car or in somebody's briefcase or pocket or something, and then that drone would just be able to follow them indefinitely wherever they went. So this is a depiction of the flight data that it's getting. It basically creates like a 3D map of its environment. This is another capability. So I had mentioned the Chinese light show, and I had called that a swarm, and it can be seen as a swarm, but it's more coordinated flight. So a swarm really is a group of UAS that are all aware of where the other UAS are, and they're all working autonomously to try to accomplish a mission. Whereas the coordinated flight, they're all pre-programmed and they know exactly where they need to be. So they're not really communicating with each other. They don't really know where the other ones are. They just know, I need to take this flight path and be at this point at this time. And they're all time synced. So this is an example of a swarm where there's multiple drones flying through this dense area, and they are mapping this whole entire area. And at the end of this video, it shows a single drone coming through and flying straight through this forest area. So all of the other drones are communicating back to the single drone and telling it the most direct path to get through, which is very interesting. Oh, we had that one again. Oh, so now we're going to kind of shift from UAS and some of the payloads and look at really, is it a threat? Do we need to be concerned about drones? Do we need to be concerned about what they can do, what they can carry? And so this is an example here of a drone being used to cause some sort of distraction and cause individuals to lose situational awareness. So in the winter of 2017, there was an issue where the FBI hostage rescue team was buzzed by a swarm of small drones. And basically what happened is that, I don't know if any of you have flown drones or have been near them, but it's very, very difficult to not look at that drone when it's flying, especially if it was flying low and heading your direction. It's almost impossible not to look at it, because if that thing hits you, it's going to hurt. And so basically just caused them to lose situational awareness of the target, and the target was able to actually escape. And then more and more we're seeing and hearing in the news drones being used to smuggle contraband into prison, over borders, and that contraband can be a variety of different things. But it's just something that's cheap. It's easy. If the drone crashes, they don't really care. They'll just go out, buy another cheap one, and try to drop this contraband into prisons and other locations. So there have been multiple events, especially in the U.S. and Mexico, with UAS loaded with C4. Again, there's just another example of a dropping device in the middle picture there, used to drop golf balls, but that could easily be rigged up to drop something else. And then the C4 objects are actually being, so before they were just getting rid of the drone as well, so they would just crash the drone and detonate C4, but now they're starting to drop these packages and detonate them remotely. So the adversary there is kind of becoming more intelligent and looking at the threat. And that's something that's important as well, is when you're looking at the threat in your area is what is your adversary? Is it someone that's maybe just a clueless careless that just thought your facility was cool and wanted to come take pictures? Or is it someone that actually has malicious intent and is wanting to come on and cause harm? This is a very popular incident that happened. I believe one just happened recently, or a similar incursion happened recently, I believe within the last year. But basically, the incident happened Gatwick Airport. They were kind of ahead of the game. They did a vulnerability analysis to understand if drones were going to be a concern. They actually had a drone response plan. They practiced what to do in the event of a drone. They posted up signs, and they installed a system on their roof that was a radio frequency sensing and detection system. But what they didn't know was that this system only detected DJI brand drones, which are kind of the most popular drone on the market right now. I think 80 to 85% of the drone market are DJIs. So it was a good choice, because the probability of the drone coming into your facility being a DJI brand is high. But the drone that came in was not a DJI brand. I believe it was two. And so it shut down the airport for a really long time. And so some of the lessons learned from that was you need to make sure you have adequate detection and mitigation solutions, and then testing. So if they would have tested against non-DJI drones, they would have understood, okay, yeah, our system doesn't do anything. Using a blended system or a system with multiple detection and assessment and mitigation technologies can help increase your chances of mitigating that UAS if you do have an incursion. And then a need for continuous vulnerability assessments, because the UAS market right now is advancing so rapidly that you might have a system today that works really good, but in a month, in a couple of weeks, something else might come out that can easily beat it, and you need to be aware of that and be able to adapt your system to that changing threat. And then also, one of the things that happened with that event was eventually they had to call the local police, which had the approval to mitigate that obtained the approval to mitigate the UAS, and they were able to get the UAS out of the site. But that took hours, and the airport was shut down for multiple hours. So having all of these involvements with police, the aviation authority, maybe even airport towers, things like that, can help mitigate an incursion like this, or shorten the time of the incursion, having those kind of communications already in place. So, okay, next we will look at some of the counter UAS methods, looking into what is a counter UAS, what are the different technology types, and then some of the difficulties with counter UAS, and utilizing them, installing, testing all the various difficulties there. So a counter UAS is really just a technology, so it can either be a single technology or a combination of technologies used to sense, assess, and mitigate a UAS. Some of the common sensing technologies include radio frequency, there's radars, visual sensing, as well as acoustic sensing, trying to listen to the sound, the unique sound that comes off of a drone in flight. And then the assessment technologies, and generally you're going to have RF or visual. RF is generally library based. So what that is the manufacturer of these systems will go and they'll classify a bunch of drones in their system, and when they see that RF signal, it'll tell them, oh, it's this type of drone, and it'll show you a picture and all that stuff. But again, if that drone is not in the library, like the Gatwick incident, it won't see it at all. So RF is proving to be a little bit difficult now with just the sheer number of drones that are out there, and there's some things you can do to kind of get around that RF detection. And then mitigation technologies, one of the most common is still RF. However, there are technologies out there today that can operate purely on GPS. Getting the approval to jam GPS is very difficult, so that proves it very hard for RF to work well. And then also there are other types of navigation systems out there that don't require any RF at all. So that mitigation method is starting to become less and less effective as these new technologies are rolling out. There's ballistic projectiles, so that might be like a bullet or a missile of some sort. Net capture systems generally are a little bit more difficult to capture that moving UAS. And then directed energy, like directed microwaves or high power microwaves, things like that. Again, less common, but becoming more common just due to the fact that some of the other mitigation technologies are becoming less and less effective. So this is just a basic example of a counter UAS operation. You're going to have your drone that comes in and crosses your level of your outer limits of detection. At that point, you're going to get an alert on your system that says, hey, we sensed a UAS out here. Then tracking will likely occur, because every hit that happens on your system, you can then build a track of the direction that it came from. Then you're going to look at how do you assess that. So is it a friendly UAS that maybe your facility is using? Is it someone that might just have a camera payload, or is it someone that's flying a very large drone that has a large payload and you need to stop it? After that, you'll then continue to track, continue to do your assessment, and then generally you have a defended volume where you have the approval to mitigate, or an area of influence. It's kind of the zone that you'll identify as to, okay, if the drone crosses this mark and we've assessed it as a threat, we're able to now mitigate. And then so you would eventually mitigate in hopes to send the drone back in the direction that it came, or have it land in a specific predetermined location, or hit it with some sort of projectile, basically just trying to stop that threat UAS. There's also a lot of handheld mitigation technologies, which us as a team we're actually really interested in, because a lot of times they're less expensive than a full up counter UAS fixed system, and they're usually very easy to use. And they're really something that we could see at being added to like a responders toolkit, something that just sits in the back of their vehicle. Basically just another tool for them to pull out and use in the event of a UAS incursion as opposed to a human incursion. And these can include the RF mitigation, net capture. There's also projectiles, like the image on the top right there is a shotgun shell with like a bolo system, so it's got strings tied between these weights, and then directed energy. But one note is that the net capture and the projectiles, those are actually very hard to accomplish because a lot of times the drones are moving fast, or they're not moving in a straight line, and all of these things make it just incredibly difficult to hit a drone. Everybody thinks, oh, if there's one flying up there, if you gave them a shotgun, they could knock it out of the sky easy. But we've done some testing with that with individuals from the military, and it's actually incredibly difficult to hit them. So a lot of individuals are moving towards directed energy and RF mitigation for the handheld devices themselves. And so I had mentioned that we've been doing some new technical efforts and some studies, and really the main reason why we do these studies is to try and inform our partners and inform us of how well these systems work, and really what are their use cases. Would they even be beneficial used at a nuclear facility? And so one of the main ones that we do, and we try to do this every other year, is we just go out and we do general research of recent UAS and counter UAS technology developments. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to understand if there's any trends in the movement of the UAS or counter UAS world. And there's a lot of great information. And basically what we do is we develop a booklet that we send out to our partners that include all of a ton of different new developments and technologies that have come out. We group them into sections like payloads, platform development, autonomous flight, cybersecurity, vulnerabilities, things like that. And basically it's just a quick way for people to go in and look at what they're interested in and understand kind of the new technology and new threats, because this is all developing so quickly that staying on top of everything is a little bit difficult. And then let's see, we also did a effort on commercial off-the-shelf RF jammers. We purchased 3 different jammers, flew multiple aircraft at them. Basically, we're trying to understand, the manufacturers say they work at such a range. Do they actually work that far out? And then how difficult are they to use? One of the interesting things that we found with these systems is that in general, when a drone loses its communications to its controller, to its pilot, they will either stop, hover in place. They'll either continue doing what they were going to do, continue their mission, because if they're GPS coordinated, you can actually program the drones to just continue on to wherever they were going or whatever they were going to do, or they'll return to home. But if you jam them, they will, and they're slated and they're programmed to hover in place. You have to sit there and continue to jam that thing until the battery dies, in which it'll generally return to home or just land. And so with a 30 to 40 minute time, they're not incredibly heavy, but they're probably 4 or 5 pound jammers. You have to sit there and hold them, continually jamming that UAS until that battery dies. Otherwise, the second you quit jamming it, that the pilot's going to regain control and be able to just continue doing what they were doing anyways. So trying to understand things like that, kind of pros and cons of the system, things that the manufacturer just won't tell you, right? When you talk to a manufacturer of any of these counter UAS systems, they're going to say, oh, it's the greatest thing in the world. It works for every type of UAS. But in general, we found that that's not the case. We also did some testing of tethered UAS systems. So essentially, these are just drones that are hooked to some sort of a tether, and the tether's there to provide power. And some of them can even provide data to give you a secure camera or payload transmission. And really, we were trying to understand how these might be used at a facility to improve situational awareness, or during an event. You can pop these up and essentially have eyes in the sky. Very limited operator involvement. So a lot of these fly almost fully autonomous, and really just if we thought they would be useful or if it would be more of a hindrance to the site. And then also looking at general and kind of regular response. So using a vehicle and a responder to go respond to an alarm, versus using a drone. So we've been doing some side-by-side testing of utilizing a drone to go analyze a situation, or to go deliver something to a remote area, versus a standard vehicle and human, and just trying to understand what time benefits are there. Are there time benefits? What is the drone better or not? How difficult is it to operate the drone, and what kind of caveats might there be with this operation and difficulties? But again, really, our goal with all of this is one, to improve our knowledge, but really it's to have shareable information that addresses questions that we'll get during technical exchanges. So a lot of times we've been asked about, well, have you ever tried these jammers? How do they work? Oh, I saw this tethered system. How does it work? And so we try to, when we get those questions, think about, well, maybe we should look at testing these so we have some information on that, again, for ourselves and to share. And so with counter UAS, there really is no perfect mitigation solution. So the technology, the speed that the technology is evolving is way faster than the policy and regulation. Regulation and policy is not keeping up with the pace that the technology is coming out. The technical solutions in terms of counter UAS systems can't keep up either. The counter UAS systems, like I said, might be great today, but in a month, in a year, they likely won't be able to protect against that threat without having to do some upgrades or some updates. And then something that a lot of people don't generally think about is the legal and liability. So you might be jamming this individual, but there's also spoofing counter UAS systems, which essentially, the way these work is they take over control of the drones. So basically, you're sending the same signal that the pilot's controller is sending, and then that drone thinks that your system is now the controller, and you can then control it and tell it to go land somewhere. Some of the counter UAS systems have the ability to view the video feed coming off of these drones, and doing that might violate some privacy concerns. And so even knocking down someone's physical property could potentially cause some legal and liability issues. And so an example is that in the United States, a drone or a UAS is classified the exact same as a passenger aircraft. So if you go in your backyard and there's a drone and you throw a rock at it and knock it out of the sky, by the United States Federal Aviation Administration, that it is the exact same as you throwing a rock and hitting a jet with 200 passengers on it. So there's kind of a gap there in the policy and regulation and legal and liability that we're trying to work through to break that apart, to say, yeah, a drone that doesn't have a human on it is not even close to the same as a passenger airline. So there's a lot of different things that are kind of going against being able to use a counter UAS, and make it very difficult to solve this problem currently. But there are some things that we like to let sites know and other countries know that you might be able to do without actually needing a counter UAS, because implementing a counter UAS, there's tons of approvals, there's tons of things around operating it, and then just a lot of difficulties like we've went through. But so basically, these are just non-counter UAS methods to mitigate UAS. So you might look at things about your site or characteristics of your site that you never would have thought of protecting, the needed protection from a human. So things like facility hardening. You could do things to protect individuals or to conceal movement of individuals from a drone using like walkways and coverings or concealments. Changing things like operational security. So if you're having to do some sort of a secure or I guess just secure activity or very kind of high level activity, you might do that inside or under a covering or at a different time where it would be more difficult for a drone to kind of do that surveillance. Then you might be able to use obscurants like nets, things like that to help protect the facility. But a lot of these are just examples of things that you might be able to do now if you have an immediate threat, that you might be able to do now without the need for a policy and regulation change to allow you to actually mitigate or to affect that UAS while it's in flight. And that is all I have. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate the opportunity, and please let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you so much, Casey. Always informative and entertaining to hear from you and the great work that your team is doing. So just two points right now. Unfortunately, I just got called away, so I'm going to have to sign off from the meeting here a few minutes early. And so number two, Timothy, I would ask if you would facilitate the Q&A for those in the audience. Thank you so much for participating, and I will hopefully see many of you again on Thursday for the next in this current lecture series. Thanks, everyone.
Bye,
Thanks.
bye, Adam. I have a question to my students. Do you have a question? If you have a question, you can ask in Ukrainian, and I will translate it. Якщо у вас є питання, я можу їх перекласти на англійську мову, можете написати в чаті або просто задати. No question? Thank you very much, Casey, for a very informative presentation, very good and very interesting.
Oh yeah, you're very welcome. And if anyone has any other questions, just please feel free to reach out to Adam, and he'll route those questions to me, and we can get those answered later. I know that was kind of like a lot of information fairly quickly, but I was really trying to get as much in as I possibly could. And also, you could talk to Adam. We have a lot of other presentations and material that we can share as well. If there's specific interest in any kind of specific thing that I talked about, we have very detailed presentations and information on that as well. So if you're interested in that, reach out to Adam, and he can probably try to get something scheduled.
Oh, it will be very good. I will focus Adam that you send a list of topics maybe for future lectures.
Okay, that sounds great. Yeah, I'll talk to Adam and let him know. Send that over, and then he can talk with you all and try to figure that out.
Okay, if we do not have any more questions, thank you very much, and I think we can complete our meeting.
Okay, that sounds great. Thank you very much.
Goodbye.
Yep, bye-bye, everyone.